Amaka Ease had always known what her priorities were: education, survival, and making her parents proud back in Nigeria. Nothing else mattered. Not the glamour of Seoul's nightlife, not the whispers of romance floating through the university hallways, and certainly not the giggles of other foreign students who seemed to fall for Korean boys like it was part of their curriculum. A scholarship student in one of South Korea's top universities, Amaka had worked too hard, prayed too long, and sacrificed too much to let her guard down now. While other girls took selfies on Namsan Tower and flirted at cafes in Gangnam, Amaka spent her evenings with thick textbooks and black tea in her small student apartment. But her roommate, Chidinma, had other ideas. "Life is not all about books, my dear," Chidinma declared, tossing her braids over her shoulder as she flipped through Netflix options on the shared TV. "When was the last time you laughed? Or wore lipstick?" Amaka smirked. "I laughed yesterday, when your noodles boiled dry." Chidinma rolled her eyes. That wasn't laughter. That was wickedness. They both burst out laughing. Later that night, curled up with a blanket and a rom-com playing in the background, Amaka found herself unusually relaxed. The on-screen couple had met through a dating app and were now sipping coffee under cherry blossoms. Then came a real-life dating app commercial, flashy, cheesy, but strangely hypnotic. "Omo, this is a sign." Chidinma gasped, snatching Amaka's phone with ninja speed. "Wait, what are you doing?" Amaka shot up. "Creating your profile. Don't worry, I won't use a picture where you look like a lost goat." "Gee, I'm not doing this." "Just one date." Chidinma pleaded dramatically. "One. What's the worst that could happen? He ghosts you? You delete the app and go back to your precious books." Amaka hesitated. She had built walls around herself so carefully. But in that moment, something in her cracked open. Maybe it was a loneliness she refused to admit. Maybe it was curiosity. "Fine," she said under her breath. "Just one." Chidinma squealed like she had just won the lottery. "You won't regret this." Amaka wasn't so sure. Welcome to Moonlit Stories, where moonlight meets myth. Love timeless tales? Then hit like, subscribe, and join the circle. Every story begins with you. Across the city, high above the streets of Seoul's financial district, Lee Jiwon stared at his phone in boredom. Every profile he swiped past was a different version of the same person. Forced smiles, perfect angles, shallow bios, until one caught his eye. A Nigerian student. No filters. A bio that read, "I prefer books to bad decisions, and I don't do, hey, beautiful." Lee Jiwon chuckled. For the first time in months, something stirred in him. He tapped message. Back in her apartment, Amaka's phone buzzed. She opened the app. The message read, "You seem like the kind of woman who reads the last page first." Am I right? Amaka blinked, and without even realizing it, she smiled. High above Seoul, the skyline glittered to the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lee Jiwon's penthouse. The apartment was quiet, sterile, even except for the low hum of a jazz playlist playing in the background. He had just returned from another strategy meeting, another press briefing, another reminder that he was the face of Korea's most powerful tech conglomerate. At only 31, Lee Jiwon had everything: money, influence, power. But none of it impressed him anymore. He stared at the dating app screen. Still open. Amaka Ease. Nigerian. PhD candidate. Bio. "I prefer books to bad decisions, and I don't do hey beautiful." Most women tried to impress him with beauty. This one had impressed him with wit. She didn't list clubs, cocktails, or designer brands. Instead, she talked about village sunsets, rice cooked on firewood, and her dream to one day build a research center back home. He reread her reply to his first message. "Only because the last page tells me if the story is worth reading." "Are you?" He had smirked then, and now again. Most women either threw themselves at him or ran at the first hint of who he was. But Amaka had no idea who she was talking to. And for once, he liked that. Meanwhile, in a cramped apartment on the university side of Seoul, Amaka sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop forgotten, as she reread her conversation with Jiwon L. He was surprisingly thoughtful, asking questions no one else did, about her dreams, not just her major. But something still felt odd, too composed, too refined. Too confident to be a regular student or random office worker. Be careful, she murmured to herself. She decided to ask the question. So, what do you do? It took a few minutes before the reply came. I run a company. Family business. Tech. She frowned. Vague. Amaka replied bluntly. Let me guess you invented Samsung? To her surprise, he laughed. No, but I do own a few things you probably use every day. She rolled her eyes. Show off. But deep down, she was curious and slightly amused. He messaged again. 5 dates. That's my offer. No expectations. Just you and me, 5 times. If we feel nothing, we walk away. She stared at the screen. 5 dates? With a stranger? In a foreign country? With someone who clearly had secrets? But the boldness of it was intriguing. Her heart pounded. She wasn't the type to do this. But maybe it was time to stop being the type. She typed slowly. Fine, but I set the rules. First date is coffee. Daytime. Public. Seconds later, his reply came. Done. You pick the place. I'll be there. Chidinma poked her head into the room. So? What did I tell you? Amaka ignored her, but she couldn't ignore the flutter in her chest. Something had begun. Something she couldn't quite define. The cafe Amaka chose was nestled quietly between 2 alleys near Awa University. A cozy, low-lit space filled with bookshelves, jazz music, and the scent of freshly ground beans. Nothing loud, nothing extravagant. Just peace. She arrived 5 minutes early, as always, dressed in a soft brown sweater and dark jeans. She had twisted her natural hair into a neat bun. No makeup, no pretense. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to confirm her suspicion that this Jiwon L was too good to be true. She found a corner table and pulled out a book, not because she intended to read, but because she needed something to do with her hands. 10 minutes passed. Then the door opened, and in he walked. Tall, clean-cut, effortlessly composed. Lee Jiwon wasn't dressed like a billionaire. Just a navy sweater, dark jeans, and white sneakers. But there was something about his presence, something that made people glance up without knowing why. Amaka froze mid-sentence on the page. He spotted her, offered a small bow, then walked over. You came, he said. You're late, she replied. He smiled. Traffic. But I make it a point never to be late twice. They ordered drinks, her usual caramel tea latte, his black Americano, and sat. For a moment, silence lingered. Amaka waited for him to break into self-praise or throw in a compliment. He didn't. Instead, he looked at her thoughtfully. Your accent, you're from the southeast of Nigeria? She raised an eyebrow. You know Nigeria? I visited Lagos once for a tech summit, but I read more than I travel. Your culture fascinates me. That caught her off guard. He wasn't flirting. He was genuinely curious. Their conversation meandered, from Nigerian literature to Korean work culture, from village proverbs to Seoul's obsession with convenience. Jiwon didn't dominate the conversation. He asked, listened, then shared. At one point, she found herself laughing. Not politely, really laughing. He noticed. Your laugh's different from your texts, he said. How so? Texts are guarded. Your laugh isn't. Amaka paused, feeling seen and slightly exposed. She glanced around the room, suddenly aware of the stares. 2 Korean girls in the corner whispered behind coffee cups, eyes flickering toward her. She didn't flinch. She had faced worse back home. You're used to attention, she said, her eyes steady. Ignore them, he replied. They're not part of this table. That was the first time she felt it, that he saw her, not just the novelty of her foreignness. As they left the cafe, Seoul's autumn breeze greeted them. The leaves rustled along the sidewalk, amber and gold in motion. He walked her to the station. No pressure, he said softly. We keep it casual. You set the pace. She nodded, eyes meeting his. We'll see. They parted, but long after she entered the subway, her fingers still tingled where he had gently touched her elbow. And in the back of her mind, a voice whispered, this might be more than just one date. Amaka thought the second date would be another quiet meetup. Maybe dinner at a modest restaurant. Another long walk through Seoul's quieter streets. She hadn't expected the text that came on Friday afternoon. Saturday, 2 p.m., I'm sending a car. Dress however you feel most like yourself. She frowned. Sending a car? Who was this man? Chidinma squealed when she heard. He's not playing, billionaire things. Amaka waved her off, but deep down, she was nervous, curious, excited, cautious. When the sleek black vehicle pulled up outside their apartment, the driver offered a small bow and opened the door. Inside, soft jazz played and a bottle of still water sat chilled in the cup holder. This wasn't a date. This was a scene from a K-drama. The car pulled into a quiet district she didn't recognize. They passed security gates, then turned into a modern building surrounded by glass and minimal design. She stepped out and found Lee Jiwon waiting by the entrance, dressed in a crisp gray coat over a black turtleneck. Simple, yet tailored to perfection. "Welcome," he said with a smile. She narrowed her eyes. "Where are we?" He opened the door and gestured. "An art gallery. It hasn't opened to the public yet. A friend curates it. I thought maybe we'd both enjoy something new." Inside, the gallery was silent except for the soft hum of overhead lights. The walls carried pieces that were raw, emotional bursts of color, pieces that felt more like confessions and paintings. Amaka walked slowly, arms crossed as she studied each piece. "This one," she said softly, stopping in front of a canvas splashed with red and black. "It reminds me of home. The chaos, the beauty." Jiwon stood beside her, watching her, not the art. "Tell me more," he said. And she did. They spent over an hour moving from one painting to another. He never rushed her, never redirected, just listened, asked, and responded with quiet thoughtfulness. She noticed the way he held himself, not with arrogance but control, like someone who had to constantly perform perfection but was desperate for honesty. At one point, she caught him staring, not at the art, but at her. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "You just look like you're finally breathing." She turned away quickly, cheeks warming. Why did he always manage to say things that hit her where she lived? Afterward, they walked to a nearby rooftop cafe for tea. The wind swept through her scarf as they sat under the pale autumn sun. "Why me?" she finally asked, the question that had haunted her since their first message. He looked at her, serious now. "Because you're the only one who didn't try to be anything else." She didn't know what to say, but she smiled, because deep down she understood. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was trying to be seen. And for the first time in her life, so was she. Amaka had never worn anything like it before. The emerald green gown shimmered under her bedroom light, hugging her figure modestly yet elegantly. It had arrived that morning in a black box with a handwritten note tucked inside. "Tonight's important. I'd be honored if you came with me. No pressure." "Jiwon," Chidinma screamed when she opened the box. "My sister, this is not a man, this is a movement." Amaka wasn't sure how to feel. The invitation was for a charity gala hosted by Korea's elite. She had Googled the guest list. Everyone from CEOs to government ministers would be there. What was she, a Nigerian girl on a scholarship, doing in their midst? By 7 p.m., the car pulled up outside a grand glass structure overlooking the Han River. Cameramen flashed outside as Jiwon stepped out, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo. Then he turned to help her out. As Amaka stepped onto the carpeted path, whispers began instantly. "Who is she? Is she Nigerian? She's not even Korean." Jiwon leaned closer, his hand gently guiding her back. "They can whisper. You belong here. Just breathe." Inside, crystal chandeliers dangled like frozen stars. Live strings played soft music as servers in white gloves passed champagne flutes. Jiwon introduced her people with ease, always placing a protective hand near her lower back. Never possessive, just grounding. Amaka smiled, answered questions, and tried not to overthink every movement. But the eyes followed her, and not all of them were kind. By the dessert course, the whispers turned into murmurs. The attention was no longer subtle. A woman in a silk hanbok passed by with a sharp smile and said in Korean, just loud enough. He always did like exotic. Amaka, clench your teeth. Jiwon didn't respond. He simply looked at her with soft apology in his eyes. Come, he said quietly, let's dance. Under golden lights, Jiwon took her hand. The music slowed. Amaka followed his steps, stiff at first, but gradually relaxing as he whispered, just listen to the rhythm, not the room. And so she did. For a moment, the stares of judgment, the weight of two cultures clashing, all melted away. There was just music and him. After the dance, as they stood by the balcony overlooking the river, he finally said, you handled that better than I ever could. She turned to him. How do you live like this? By knowing what matters. And right now, that's you. She looked at him, really looked, and in his eyes, she saw something raw. Not just admiration, not fascination, something dangerous, something real. She should have walked away. She should have reminded herself this was just 5 dates. But when his hand brushed hers again, she didn't move, because for the first time in her life, she didn't want to leave. The invitation came as simply as all the others. No drama, no build-up. Saturday. Rooftop. Just us. No expectations. But Amaka knew this wasn't just another date. This was the 5th. The last one. The one where they'd decide. She stood before the mirror that evening, fingers smoothing down her navy blue dress, classy, elegant, not too loud. Her scarf fluttered slightly in the autumn breeze through her half-open window. Chidinma watched her from bed. You're glowing, she teased. I'm confused, Amaka replied honestly. Her heart had betrayed her weeks ago. It had fluttered during coffee, skipped at the gallery, pounded at the gala. Every wall she had built was now paper thin. Still, she wasn't sure what she wanted from tonight. Or worse, what he wanted. The rooftop restaurant sat high above the city skyline, bathed in soft golden lights and surrounded by potted trees and delicate lanterns that swayed with the wind. The world below faded into silence. Jiwon stood at the far end, gazing over Seoul's glowing cityscape. His black suit hugged his tall frame like it had been stitched by hand, which, knowing him, it probably had. But tonight, he looked different. Not polished, not curated. He looked still. When she approached, he turned and smiled. Right on time. Barely, she smirked, though her pulse was anything but calm. They sat under a pergola draped in fairy lights. Dinner was quiet, but warm. The conversations were slower now, less guarded. Amaka spoke about her mother back in Enugu, how she sold fabrics to raise her daughters, how Amaka had studied in candlelight, how her dream was to return and build science labs in rural Nigerian schools. Jiwon didn't interrupt. He just listened, like he was memorizing her words. And when the final plate was cleared, he stood slowly. Walk with me? They walked to the edge of the rooftop, where the glass railing held back the sky. The city shimmered below them, and the silence wrapped around them like a blanket. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a velvet box, set it between them on the ledge. Marry me. No preamble, no speech, just those 2 words. Amaka froze, her breath caught in her chest. The ring sparkled even under the soft lights, but she barely saw it. You barely know me, she whispered. I know what I feel, he said, voice calm. And I don't waste time with what doesn't matter. She shook her head, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Jiwon, we're from 2 different worlds. He nodded. I know, but I'm willing to build a bridge if you'll meet me halfway. Her eyes searched his. He wasn't joking. He wasn't rushing. He was ready. But was she? Before she could answer, before she could even process the question, her phone buzzed. And with it, so did the past she thought she had escaped. The storm was coming, and it had a name. The message on Amaka's phone was short, but venomous. You don't belong in his world. Leave while you still can. Nari. She stared at it for a long moment, heart thudding, before quietly slipping the phone into her bag. Jiwon was still by the railing, unaware, watching the city as if trying to find peace in its lights. She had no words, No answer. Not yet. But the storm arrived faster than expected. By Monday, her inbox was flooded with anonymous messages, accusations, rumors, hate. She's using him for money. She tricked him with pity. She wants a green card. Even in her lecture hall, whispers followed her. A few classmates looked away. Some smirked, others silent, sympathetic, but distant. Then came the article, a gossip blog titled, Korea's Tech Prince Falls for Foreign Flame, Gold Digger or Genuine Love? With a photo, her photo, Amaka felt the ground shake beneath her. Her scholarship, her dignity, her very place in this country now under scrutiny. All for falling for a man she didn't expect to meet. She tried to distance herself, skipped calls, left texts unread, even Jiwon's, until Nari came in person. Outside her dormitory, draped in designer white, heels clicking like accusations on the pavement, Nari stared her down. You don't get it, she said, voice sharp but controlled. You're a tourist in his world. I'm legacy. Amaka's fingers clenched around her bag. I didn't come here to fight you, she replied evenly. Nari stepped closer. He'll get tired of you. He'll remember where he comes from. You're just a phase. And you're just scared, Amaka said calmly. Scared that for once, he chose someone on his own. Just then, a sleek black car pulled up. The door opened. Jiwon stepped out, his eyes scanning the tension instantly. He walked straight to Amaka. Nari, he said, his voice like ice. This ends here. She blinked. Jiwon, I don't love you. I never did. Nari faltered. Her face, one sculpted in pride, cracked just for a moment. Then she turned and left, heels clashing like thunder in retreat. Jiwon turned to Amaka, reached for her hand. You okay? He asked softly. No, she whispered, but I will be. That night, they sat side by side on his rooftop, the same one where he first proposed. He didn't push. He didn't speak. And finally, Amaka said, I don't want to be your rebellion or your escape. If we do this, it has to be for real. He nodded slowly. I don't want anything less. She looked at him, at the city, at everything their worlds said they couldn't be. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, not out of impulse, but decision. Because sometimes love isn't about where you're from. It's about where you're willing to go. Together. 3 months later, Seoul was dressed in snow. Amaka stood at the back of a university auditorium, her heart pounding beneath her wool coat. She wasn't there as a student today. She was a speaker. The International Women in STEM Conference had invited her, to share her research and story. At first, she almost declined. The blog scandals had only just begun to fade. Nari's whispers had gone quiet, but some wounds still lingered beneath the surface. But Jiwon had gently placed a printed invitation on her desk and simply said, they need to hear you. So here she was. As her name was called, Amaka walked to the stage, head held high, heels clicking softly like the beat of her new confidence. She adjusted the mic, glanced down at the crowd, mostly Korean, some international, all waiting. She spoke not just about her research on renewable energy for rural communities, but about identity, isolation, and resilience. Being far from home is hard, but being far from who you are is harder. I almost gave up. I almost believed I didn't belong in certain rooms. Until someone reminded me, truth doesn't need permission to exist. It just is. When she finished, the applause didn't come right away. But when it did, it was thunderous. In the front row, Lee Jiwon stood, no longer the cold CO, but her silent anchor. Later that night, they walked side by side down the snowy university path. He slipped his gloved fingers into hers. You didn't just survive, he murmured. You made this place better by staying. She smiled. They still stare, you know. Let them, he shrugged. They're looking at a legend. She laughed and elbowed him gently. You're full of drama. Only for you. As they turned the corner, she stopped. Across the street, glowing from the electronic billboard above the tech plaza, her face appeared. A poster, a real one, Not gossip this time, but an ad for her initiative. Lights for learning. Solar kits for African schools. Beneath her photo, bold text read, Amaka Ease, powering the future. She gasped, "You did this?" Jiwon shook his head. "You did. I just bought the space." Her chest rose with a deep breath. This city had once felt too big, too cold, too closed off. Now it felt like hers. "You know," she said, turning to him, "when I came to Korea, I promised myself no distractions. And look what that got you," he grinned. "Love, chaos, and your face and lights." She laughed, but her eyes softened. "You really would have let me go after 5 dates." He paused. "No," he whispered. "I just said that so you'd say yes to the first one." She shook her head in disbelief and reached up to kiss him, snow falling softly around them, because in a world that once told her she didn't belong, she wrote her own ending. The dining table in the Lee family estate was long, heavy, and intimidating, carved from ancient oak and polished to perfection. It had seen decades of business deals, arranged courtships, and stern lectures. But tonight, it would witness something very different. Amaka sat at one end, flanked by silence and stares. She wore a soft ivory blouse and a simple anchor skirt, modest, elegant, and intentionally Nigerian. Her scarf was pinned neatly, her chin lifted high. Across from her sat Chairman Lee, Jiwon's grandfather. His sharp eyes scanned her like a courtroom judge, arms folded, silver hair combed back in that no-nonsense way that announced power. Jiwon sat beside her, calm but alert, like a silent shield. The silence was thick. Finally, Chairman Lee spoke, his Korean clipped and formal. "You do not come from tradition. You do not understand the expectations placed on my grandson." Amaka understood enough Korean to catch the meaning. Jiwon translated softly, but she raised a hand. "I understood," she said clearly in practice Korean. "And with all due respect, sir, neither did your wife. When you married her from a fishing village and brought her to Seoul." That turned heads. Even Jiwon blinked. The old man narrowed his eyes, surprised, but not offended. "You've done your research." "I've done more than that," Amaka replied. "I've learned, and I'm still learning." A quiet descended again. Jiwon reached for her hand under the table. "Tell me something," Chairman Lee said after a pause. "Why are you really here?" Amaka met his gaze. "Because I love your grandson. Not his company. Not his name. Him. And I didn't come to prove myself to anyone. I came to share a meal. It was bold. It was honest. And it was enough." Chairman Lee gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then in a gruff voice, he called a housekeeper to serve the first course. Jiwon exhaled. Later, as they strolled through the estate garden under lantern-lit trees, Amaka finally let herself breathe. "I don't think he likes me," she said. "He respects you," Jiwon replied. "That's rarer than approval." She smiled. "Your family is intense. They weren't expecting someone like you. Someone Nigerian?" He stopped walking. "No," he said softly. "Someone brave enough to challenge tradition, to sit at their table and not shrink." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I just want a life that makes sense for both of us." He held her tighter. "We're not going to follow the path," he whispered. "We're going to build our own." That night, back at their apartment, Amaka opened her laptop. The solar project had gained traction. Donations were flooding in. But more than that, emails from young Nigerian girls studying abroad had begun pouring in too. "Thank you for showing me I belong here. I didn't think someone like me could matter until I saw you." Amaka blinked back tears. She had fallen in love. And somehow, she had become a light for others too. A warm breeze swept through Enugu, stirring the fabric canopies and rustling palm leaves as drums echoed faintly from the village square. Amaka stood at the edge of her childhood compound, barefoot on red earth, wearing a flowing white gown trimmed with soft green embroidery. Her mother adjusted the coral beads on her neck and stepped back, eyes shining. "My daughter," Mama whispered, voice thick with pride. "You went to Korea and still came back with your name." Amaka smiled, and with something more. From behind, a familiar hand reached for hers. Jiwon, dressed in a tailored cream kaftan with subtle Korean embroidery on the cuffs, stepped beside her. He bowed gently to Mama before wrapping an arm around Amaka's waist. They were here to launch the Lights for Learning project in Amaka's village, her promise fulfilled. 10 rural schools had already received solar kits. Children were now studying past sunset. The ceremony was to thank her, but for Amaka, this trip was more than that. It was a homecoming on her own terms. Later that afternoon, as elders, cousins, and neighbors gathered under canopies, Amaka and Jiwon stood before the crowd. Children wore shirts with her foundation's logo. Old women ululated when her name was called. Jiwon said nothing unless spoken to. He helped distribute bags of rice and solar lanterns. He knelt when Mama handed him cola nuts. And he danced, awkwardly but sincerely, when the drummers insisted. The crowd loved him. So did Mama. That evening, after the celebration, Amaka and Jiwon sat under a mango tree behind the house. The stars above them were brighter than city lights. The crickets sang. "This," Amaka whispered, "is where it all began." Jiwon took her hand. "And where it continues. You sure you can handle Nigerian in-laws forever?" she teased. "I've survived soul gossip, corporate sabotage, and your friend Chidinma's side eyes. I'll survive anything." They laughed. Then, without a word, Jiwon reached into his pocket. Not with nerves, not with a velvet box, but with a small, hand-carved wooden ring. One of the village boys had made it that morning. He slid it onto her finger. "No pressure, no cameras, no tabloids," he said. "Just us." Amaka blinked back tears. "I already chose you," she whispered. "And I'll keep choosing you," he replied. "In Seoul, in Enugu, in every version of tomorrow." They kissed quietly beneath the stars. And somewhere in the village, a generator went silent, because for once, the school had light, real light, just like her story.